This may look like a 42-year-old's dream front lawn, but that's only halfway true, because Chris Driver decided one day, hey, I don't want to just work on Nissan Rust and try fixing finicky RB engines. I want to make it a full-time job. So he did. And 900 imports later, they're still edging people like me with new cars on the site practically every single day. There's cars like the R33 GTR, the FDRX7, Pulsars, and JZX 100s that are apparently worth $1 billion. But is any of that actually true? Or was Chris just a psycho? I decided to come on over to here into Virginia with Chris Driver, Driver Motorsports, to answer the question as to why it seems to me that Japanese cars make no sense. There's 56 cars for sale right now here at Driver Motorsports, right? With over 900 cars sold that have been on their website at some point or another. You've got another, I think, 26-ish on the water that are coming on a big boat, and 30 cars still in Japan that are waiting for a boat to begin with, which means there should be some cool stuff here, right? And I think for the low price of maybe a house, we might be able to actually drive one. This right here is what a $75,000 Nissan looks like. It's got a whole bunch of good stuff. It's got a top secret hood, it's got 400R side skirts, it's got a bunch of goodies underneath the bonnet, as good old Jeremy Clarkson would say, and this thing is an absolute riot. Now here's the thing though, it does cost about as much as quite literally a house in 2017. This is an expensive car. This has now gotten to the same price as an Audi R8, a German supercar. So is it any good? Honestly speaking, at $75,000, is that an underappreciated Japanese car, or are people just thinking that money's not real and they're just buying this stuff because they can?
I would say it's a little bit of both. The R33 in general is underappreciated. However, it's the fastest of the 3 GTRs around the Nürburgring, the R32, the 33, and the 34. So yeah, a little bit of both.
You know, I would say that I have a budget for supper clubs and steak dinners every night, but I'd be lying to you, I'd be lying to me, and my CPA. So why don't we get into something that's a little bit more comfortable? Something that you may think is expensive, but is quite literally the opposite. Now, you see a lot of these. You think JDM car, you think an R33, an R32, and a whole bag of cash. But there's another car I want to show you that Driver does bring in that's super cool, and I think you and I can actually afford. Now, you might be asking yourself, what are you sitting in? Ladies and gentlemen, you're sitting in a Toyota Celsior. This is the Japanese equivalent of the Lexus LS400. And the best part about this one is you can buy 7 of these before you would need to buy one of those. Now, I'm gonna be honest with you. This isn't the same performance as an R33 GTR. This is in fact way better. This car is the twin to the LS400. This car is going to last you, I can confidently say, at least 1 million miles. The RB sounds fantastic, whimsical, perfect, heavenly sound. It's great until it breaks. The thing I think most people forget about Japanese cars is that cars like this exist. It's right-hand drive, it's fun, it's got low miles, because over in Japan, you see, you get taxed by how big your car is, how big your engine is, and how much space you take up. And that's why I'm convinced that for the longest time, Americans just weren't welcome. You see, I know Driver Motorsports, and I've known them for a few years, and I love that they have the fancy cars, the ones with all the special editions and acronyms. But I will say that this, for me, is Driver's specialty. Picking up cars that are super interesting, super unique, and low miles, and easy to replace parts with. This costs about the same price as a Toyota Camry. If you wanted to make it cool, it's actually pretty simple. Throw some big wheels on it, throw some small tires, and maybe throw an air suspension kit on it, and you have a car that quite literally would beat almost 90% of your cars at a local car show. But not a lot of people end up buying these. So, Driver sells both of these cars. You can find them right now on their website, and I would be partial probably to this one because it's in my budget. But why are these cars so expensive? 10 years ago, you could get an R32 GTR for $22,000. Even the R33s when they first came abroad were $40,000. This one is $75,000. Are people like me to blame? The YouTubers, the people who talk about these JDM cars? I don't think so. The glory is still $12,000, and I love that car to death. Is it because of the importers for driving up demand? Not really sure that's it either. Inflation, it could be that. But even inflation from 2016 to now is only about 27%, which makes, what, a $22,000 car 27? This is confusing. In 1970, a Ferrari 250 GTO was $50,000. That's a $50 million car now. A 993 Turbo Porsche in about 2008-2009 could be found for $27,500. And yes, in 2015, you could find an R32 GTR for $22,000, like I just said. But I feel like I need to quote something out of an old show. Maybe not that old, Game of Thrones. Varys used to say, power resides where people think it resides. And I think for cars, it's almost the same thing, except change power for value. Value resides wherever people like me and people like you think it resides. Take this car for instance. I'm sitting in a Toyota Chaser right now, manual swapped, probably 300 horsepower. It's got a fancy little tiny steering wheel, enough little goodies including HKS coilovers, forged two-piece wheels, it's wide body, oh, and it's painted purple. This car was $35,000. And this is something almost every car guy or gal should own, but never will because we don't think we need to buy responsible vehicles. This is a Hilux Surf. It's a Japanese 4Runner. This one has 70,000 miles and it's $17,000. So if you look at this one, this is comparable to GR86. And something over here, I'm actually not entirely sure you'd find something as clean as that in that format for $17,000. So why aren't you buying one? So I guess not all Japanese cars make no sense. And I'm sure in 5 years' time, I'll probably be kicking my cankles for not picking up some of the cars that I just told you were a budget find. Some of them, sure, are insanely priced. And sure, I'm sure it's worth it out there to somebody. But for me, there are cars in this list that seem to have not hit this oh dear God price point yet, but still a realistic, kind of makes sense, and it's still super dope. Buying $9 coffee on a Sunday morning makes no sense. Going to McDonald's and having to pay for extra dipping sauces when the food is already overpriced makes no sense. And the tipping culture to tip just to tip sometimes, well, almost all the time, makes no sense. But we still end up buying that extra cup of buffalo sauce because we want to. We still end up tipping our server a little extra when we feel like they did a good job. And sometimes we spend money on $9 coffee on a Sunday morning because it feels good. Not everything always has a rhyme, a reason, or a logic behind it. Sometimes we do it not because it feels good or it feels bad, it's just because it's something we want to do. And for me, I think driving these cars and experiencing what these cars are, no matter if you're buying a $10,000 car or a $70,000 car from Driver, sometimes you just do it because it feels good.